Lonely Monk Productions. I don't know if y'all have heard the new Madison McFerrin album Scorpio yet, but yo,
that's my Jawn!
Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You're tasting things that don't need to be measured. You ain't being judged, you won't. What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I'm your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Goodnight Jawn Boy, a.k.a. Nate 3.0. Back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I have the honor of chatting with David Lowery of the bands Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker. David is someone I've wanted to chat with since the inception of this podcast, so I am so excited for you to hear this one. We talk about his career and his new album, the autobiographical release Fathers, Sons, and Brothers. It is a good one, folks, and that is coming up in a bit. But first, what is shaking, my friends? Summer is here, and we are full on summering in this heat, I tell you. I hope you are all out there staying cool and keeping hydrated. Look, I know the episode releases, while close to schedule, have been a bit all over the place, not just on this show, but also on Too Old, Too New with Nate and Bruce, available wherever you get your podcast from. And look, I apologize for that, but while working on this and every other pod that I produce and or guest on makes me kind of feel like Superman in theaters July 11th, the Clark Kentness of my life has been a bit topsy-turvy, so to speak. You know, after 10 years at my current company, I am about to start a new day job at the end of the month, and I've also been moonlighting Bruce Willis style at the local Regal Theater, slinging coffee as a barista. Oh, yeah. So my schedule has been a bit wonky, and I think it will continue to be for a few more weeks here. So all I can do is ask of you to please, please, please have some patience with me, and I hope you stick around and continue to listen to or watch the show, even if when the assets are delayed ever so slightly. You know, I have a lot of truly amazing people lined up for chats, and I promise you, if you show me some grace, you will be rewarded with some dope episodes. You dig? All right, I hope so. You know, my conversation with David today gets into the state of the music industry and streaming and whatnot, and I feel like that conversation kind of runs parallel to this thing I've been seeing article after article discussing, and that is this band with a large number of monthly streams on Spotify that is probably most likely an AI-generated band. The music, the bio, the band photos, all of it AI. And everybody's got a take. Everybody. And I suppose I have a take too, and it's this. First, you'll notice I didn't name the band. Why? Because I don't know why everyone who correctly wants to bang the drum that this is ridiculous has not realized that by writing about it and pointing people to it, all it's doing is nothing more than making people stream it more. The streams keep growing because well-intentioned people are essentially running a press release for the band, and the curious are like, well, shit, I gotta hear this. Think of all of the real human bands out there who would love to have music blog after music blog sharing their band name and album, and instead we're into week 2 of this band isn't real and here's why I think that's bad. And I hear you. Well, Nate, people are talking about it, and I want to point out the dangers of letting generative AI compete with real musicians. Again, I get it, but maybe, just maybe, lend some of that breath to some of those real musicians. The second thing about this, we have devalued art to a point where something like this should not come as a surprise. The majority of people, the masses, they do not engage with music the way that I do or that I suspect you do, the listener, They just want things in the background to set the mood or to just kind of replace silence, which is fine to me. Not everyone has to like music the same way I do. I'm not a snob like that. I like to look at sculptures, but I'm not going to pretend like I engage with it like a true art connoisseur might. But what I think is that paying one flat, low monthly fee for all of the music in the world and theoretically saying all of those things have the same value so long as you listen to it, I'm not sure that lends itself to a fair and equitable valuation of the art. And lastly, third, this is going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And while we should be able to count on someone to hold the tech platforms and bad actors accountable, at this current time and place, ain't nobody coming to save us. So Do what we can do. Don't listen to generative AI acts, no matter how curious about it you may be. Support the humans out there creating music. Stream their music if you can. If you can afford it, buy their physical media or merch or catch them at a show. And if you can't afford that, engage with their socials, like their stuff, share their work. Let's collectively be better at being a megaphone for artists we believe deserve the respect, visibility, and financial compensation that we fear is going to an undeserving bundle of ones and zeros unfairly trained on the hard work of those same musicians we are trying to help. I don't know how to solve for the future, man, but I do know this. I do know that I will do whatever I can to continue to champion the musicians and creatives that inspire me daily where I can, like I do with this podcast. This podcast, which you can stay up to date with by following us on the socials at Yo That's My Jawn. You can hit up the Substack at yothat'smyjawn.substack.com and subscribe, and you can get all the goodness straight in your inbox. And you can probably watch some of the videos to some of my interviews or the episodes of Too Old, Too New with Nate and Bruce. And look, if you want to rock a t-shirt or get yourself a sticker or any other kind of merchandise, you can visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for links to the merch shop, the other episodes of this podcast, the guest appearances on other podcasts, and more. And as always, please rate, review, share, yada, yada, yada. You know the routine by now, and if you don't, well, now you do. My guest today is a singer and songwriter who is also known as the frontman for the legendary bands Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker. His latest solo release, Fathers, Sons, and Brothers, is an epic 28-song autobiographical tour, sprawling from some of his earliest memories as a child to the ups and downs of his music career in the aforementioned bands through stories of friends, family, children, divorce, and more. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, David Lowery. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by the great David Lowery. David, thank you for joining me on Yo That's My Jawn.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited. You are somebody whose brain I've wanted to pick for a very long time because not only am I a fan of you musically, but I'm also a fan of your writing and kind of your approach to digital assets and whatnot and the music industry at whole. So I'm really excited to be able to talk today.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Let's look forward to it. So hopefully I don't go off on too many tangents. So here we go. Yeah.
Whereas in my mind, I'm like, hopefully you do.
Okay.
So I always like to start the Wayback Machine. Tell me a little bit about yourself growing up.
I think one thing that's different for me than a lot of people was that I didn't really necessarily grow up anywhere because my father was in the Air Force. My mother was English, so we jumped around a bunch. I was born in Texas. We were briefly in Arkansas. Then we went to England. Then we went to Spain, and that's actually becomes pretty important in some ways. And then from there, we went to Southern California. And that's like where I went to high school, and went to college in Northern California and stuff like that. But I kind of moved all over the place, so didn't really know exactly where I'm from. Like it's still funny that like people are like, "Oh, you're a Californian." Like, yeah, I don't know, And you go to Texas. Texas, I actually, a friend of mine told me there was reason. If I go to Texas, they will say Texas native, and they like to claim anything. And so this friend of mine who's Jewish and from Texas is like, yeah, it's like being Jewish. You're always Jewish. Yeah. If you're born in Texas, you're always a Texan, right? So I was like, yeah, I lived there for the first 3 years of my life. So this is like pretty funny, right?
Yeah. Do you think that kind of moving around, do you still feel that way? Like, do you feel like you have a hometown now, or does like kind of touring kind of, and also, that childhood kind of lend itself to, hey, I am where I am now, I guess.
I have many hometowns. So, I've been in Athens, Georgia now about 15 years, just about 15 years. And that's, really become my home. But, I still think of Southern California where all my family lives. It's not LA. It's another area called the Inland Empire. I have a deep attachment to that, and very, very attached to that area. Yes.
Yeah. What was music like when you were a kid? Like, how did music kind of enter your life?
Well, I go into this a lot I don't know. It's sort of in the background on my new record, which is autobiographical. I at various times mentioned what my people are listening to or what my family's listening to. My mom and dad were super into music as just listeners, right? I think, it's partly that generation, sort of late 40s, early 50s, coming of age, late 40s, early 50s, radio, jukeboxes, phonographs and stuff like that were sort of accessible to the masses. People really loved their music in a certain way back then. My mom grew outside of the American Air Force Base, which, where everywhere the American military goes, we take our radio stations, or we used to. And so in a weird way, she's super knowledgeable about like all this. She was super knowledgeable about all this like 40s, 50s, early jazz, or sort of early rock and roll, jazz, blues, and especially country music, right? So she's like a, 15, 16-year-old girl, and like suddenly realizing there's this American radio station nearby, and they like listen to it, and they just thought it was like the coolest thing in the world, like kind of the way like I remember being in England in the 90s, and it just seemed like all of the kids were just super into like West Coast American hip hop. They just thought it was the coolest like stuff in the world. It was so different from where they were from. So my mom, in a lot of ways, she listened to a lot of music, and she had her opinions and her tastes about it. And my dad did as well too. I think a lot of GIs that travel around the world, that's one way that they keep in sort of a connection to home, is by bringing their music with them. But also, my parents were kind of adventurous in a weird way. So like when we were in Spain, they really picked up on the sevillanas and flamenco like culture. And a lot of people kind of think those are the same thing. And I don't quite fully understand the difference, but the sevillanas are more like this pop music kind of from that era, whereas flamencos were more improvisational and, the dancing and stuff like that. They sound similar, but they're, one's less structured and one is structured, right?
Yeah.
And they got into that stuff. And that's actually kind of why I play acoustic guitar the way I play. I play with my fingers, but I don't play it like finger picking style. I play it like this. I do use a pick with electric guitar, but on acoustic, it's my thumb and the back of my nails in the back of my finger. I kind of like that. That's just kind of a thing I picked up from being immersed in that for like, basically from the time I was like 4 till I was 9 or something like that. Heard a lot of that stuff. So that's different than a lot of people.
Yeah. Did you start playing guitar in Spain or?
No, but I started playing guitar when I was in Southern California. And here's one of the weird things is because when we moved from Spain to California, my father knew he was going to have to go overseas at some point. So the reason we went there was kind of to be closer to his family that had all moved out there. And my older sister was disabled. Like mildly disabled, but she kind of needed special schools and stuff like that. So my mom wanted to be in this one school district for my sister Sandra, and it was kind of like we couldn't really afford it. But then she realized that there was like the barrio, the Mexican American neighborhood, was actually totally affordable to her. And we had just come from Spain, so she was like, I don't know, fluent in Spanish, but conversational or whatever in Spanish. And we just like sort of transferred into like this this Mexican American neighborhood directly from Spain. And that's more that age. Like I I started playing instruments when we got to California, but at first like band instruments. My sister at some point picked up a banjo, and then she kind of got me to play guitar when we were in that area. And that's, that's kind of where I pick up guitar.
Yeah. So, did you take lessons or teach yourself?
I did take lessons, but I did take lessons. Those were helpful, but a lot of playing your instrument is just having it in your hands and always playing it and stuff like that. It was interesting too. There were bands in our neighborhood, which is a super weird thing to think about. But across the street from us was a band that used to rehearse, and they were like, you'd call them a Mexican wedding band. They basically played all variations of sort of Tex-Mex and Norteño music and stuff like that. So I heard a lot of that growing up. There was actually this cool, like sort of early 70s sort of blues rock sort of, but they were mostly Spanish speakers, right? That were in this band. Like I remember, like they used to play Robin Trower's Bridge of Sighs and just destroy it, right? Like that was a band that was in our neighborhood. I'd go out into the orchards and come around behind their house. We would sit there and they would practice on their back porch. And then there was like a band down the street from us that just basically played, or just a couple houses down from us too, that also like they played a ton of Steely Dan. They might have even been kind of like a tribute to Steely Dan, but that was kind of later. That was later in the 70s and stuff like that. It was like, it was funny, just like being around all these bands in my neighborhood, and nobody complained about it as long as you stopped at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Nobody called the police or anything,
It's amazing. Like,
and if I had lived in a different neighborhood, we wouldn't have got away with that. I don't know. It was just like a thing, right?
Yeah. It's amazing that kind of exposure too, because like you said, like culturally, like you're getting stuff that not everyone is kind of being exposed to at that time, and you I can definitely hear it in your playing and in some of your songwriting. Like definitely has that feel to it.
Right. But then I also just listened to rock like my friends did in high school. So I was listening to, the classic rock bands, of course, like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But so were my neighbors too.
Yeah.
We were all listening to rock too. There was just sort of extra stuff thrown in. And then, by like 1979 or 80, I got kind of interested in the punk and the post-punk stuff and the ska, which also fit in sort of to our world.
Yeah, I only learned recently how big ska was in Southern California Latino culture. Like I never knew about it, but also it kind of made sense too. Like it was one of those things where like you hear it and you just go, yeah, I didn't know that, but yeah, that tracks. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, and the punk thing too. There's there's a whole offshoot of punk. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a good place to live. I mean, it was for being exposed to music. We weren't in LA, but in a way that was like better because, we were just kind of more consuming it or trying to play it. There wasn't any business.
Yeah.
I think the business would have been distracting in a way.
Yeah. So what age are you when Sitting Ducks kind of comes together?
That's probably about 1980, late 1980, maybe 1981. And that lasts for it basically lasts for like a year, but it sort of, that's where I start playing with Chris Mola. At some point, Johnny Hickman was also in that group. We spun out this other thing called the Estonian Gauchos. So both of those bands provide songs, especially the ska instrumentals, but not exclusively, for Camper Van Beethoven's first couple of records. A lot of those kind of ska instrumentals come out of those bands. And then, of course, Camper Van Beethoven sort of formed with me and Chris Mola, Victor Krummenacher, this guy, David McDaniel. there's various people in and out of the early incarnation, but those all kind of go sort of each sort of year is kind of a different incarnation. Although Sitting Duck may have lasted for almost 2 years. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How did Johnny miss out on Camper Van? Because
he was, well, first of all, he lived in, he was married and lived in Southern California. He wasn't going to come to Santa Cruz with us, who were all sort of college kids, and we're sort of trying to complete our college degrees. And since we were all trying to do that, we could all kind of move in mass to Santa Cruz, or go back and forth, go to school there in the fall and spring, and be in Southern California in the summer.
Yeah.
So he kind of missed out on that. And then there was a point later in the band where I thought about getting him in the band, but he was with The Unforgiven, which had been just signed to Elektra.
Okay.
So he kind of missed out on that. Just, he had other stuff going on. And, even though we were friends and like we played with his bands and stuff like that, just the timing wasn't right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, the world makes it happen at some point, right?
Yeah, that's right. Also, Johnny was the drummer in the Estonian Gauchos.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's wild.
So he wasn't even playing guitar with us.
That is
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
So Camper Van just celebrated. This is the 40th anniversary of Telephone, right? I picked up the Record Store Day variant that came out, which sounds incredible. So thinking about like that anniversary plus the Cracker retrospective that you guys just put out recently, and then now the Father, Sons, and Brothers, kind of looking at your career, like, how has this year been in kind of the reflecting on your life? Like it's kind of like a year-long celebration of your creativity.
Well, yeah. So there were two thoughts about this. We didn't actually start out that wasn't sort of the plan at first.
Yeah.
But it was time to renew some licensing agreements, and with Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven, and we thought, well, we need to renew these with Cooking Vinyl. And then we started talking about how, there's a 40th anniversary of Telephone Free, and then I've got these solo things, and then Cracker was kind of due for a real retrospective. So we were kind of just went to Cooking Vinyl, or I went to Cooking Vinyl. I was like, here's all these things going on. I know you guys want to renew these things. Let's come up with a plan. And at first, kind of thinking, well, we'll do this 1 year, and then the next year we'll do this, and then the next year we'll do this, right? Sort of to give each of the records kind of a space. But the more, kind of talked with the Cooking Vinyl people, we were sort of like, it might be interesting just to do this all at once, or almost at once, like just really back to back, just to generate sort of more energy. Like it's a new world, I mean, it's like, you're not like, oh, well, we've got to go to, modern rock radio with this track, and we've got to do that 2 weeks in advance of the record coming out. And, I was like, there's like sort of not really any rules anymore, like how to promote everything. Everything is essentially done in a kind of grassroots manner. You have lots of little small, no offense, but you have a lot of podcasts, you don't have like a radio station in LA that's going to get on the record and pound the record, and then every radio station in that format is going to follow them. You just don't have those kind of things anymore, so you sort of, I don't know, it's just a very different way of working. So it just seemed like the better idea was just to hit all these things back to back, I mean, we're going to have there's going to be the street version. So we had the Record Store Day version of Telephone Free Landslide Victory first, and then we did my album. Now we're going to have the street version of Telephone Free Landslide Victory, be out probably in 2 months. I think that's what it is. And we had Cracker's retrospective come out before Christmas. So we're doing these things like every 2 to 3 months. bands, right?
Yeah.
And by the time the Camper Van Beethoven street version of Telephone for Last Night Victory vinyl comes out, we'll be ready to do the 40th anniversary of the second album, which we're working on now. We're working on packaging for that now. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just kind of putting a lot of stuff out and see what happens, you know?
It's crazy because, like, I get in the weeds sometimes talking about kind of the state of the music industry and whatnot, because like you got to be a part of, I actually just talked to, I don't know if you know Kevin Hansen from Huffamoose. I just talked to him recently about like the 90s to me is one of the most interesting times in the industry because of the way that the industry didn't really understand the success of Nirvana and just took chances on really, out there things, trying to find essentially the next Nirvana. And then you also have the kind of perfect storm culmination of the end of kind of the radio business being something independent and moving into kind of full on corporations owning, entire multiple markets. But like, so like, I know that it's also because it was the time I grew up, but like that time period is so interesting to me. So like when I look at like, someone like you guys who went through that and now, are releasing music in this kind of free for all that no one has the answers on what the right thing to do is. It's just kind of like, this is what works for us, so let's just do it. Like, is it freeing or is it nerve-wracking, kind of the state now of releasing music?
Yeah. Well, here's the great thing. I mean, is you can come up with a song and record it like, the next week, and then like 6 hours later after you mix it, have it on, streaming services that are available to your fans. Like, you can be really impulsive and you can release stuff directly. You could do all kinds of things that would have fallen below the threshold of commerciality. One of the reasons we didn't release singles for everything was, you had to put a lot of money up front into the plates and the vinyl pressing, and then you have the stock and stuff like that sitting around. And if you didn't sell through, you lost money on it. Right now, you can put something on the radio, right? So in some ways, that's really cool. But at the same time, you still have to release these albums. I haven't seen anybody really kind of build a real career on just like releasing singles. You kind of got to release albums and stuff like that. So now you have to do sort of all the stuff we did in the 90s, but without the revenues to support it, right? So they're almost like, it's not the best trade-off because of how expensive it is to tour, but you're essentially, making the albums as sort of advertisements for your tour. So, I mean, I don't know if it's nerve-wracking, but there's just a lot more work to be done. It's like, I've got to put something on TikTok. I've got to put something on Instagram. Oh, we just got this, interview, and there's an exclusive on a B-side. So now if we have to throw that across all of our socials, is everybody doing it? And like, there's a lot of just crappy, busy work.
Yeah.
But that reminds me, though, the fact that there's like a lot of money there. The other thing, though, about the 90s, and you can actually see this if you look at the RIAA historic revenue charts. There's a bunch of like things that you can do with their charts that are interactive. But one of the things that nobody talks about is that the 90s also is a little above average for the long-term average for revenues for the recorded music industry. And somebody told me it has to do with this. And it's somebody that was in sales at a record label, said that the thing about sort of so you get the 90s Nirvana era, right? Yet Nirvana sold a bunch of records, but so did Blues Traveler. And so did, Spin Doctor. I mean, Blues Traveler didn't like 1 in 25 people have a Blues Traveler no, Hootie and the Blowfish records. Like 25 million people had in the US had like a quarter or something. Like it worked out to be like, some high percentage of every household had a Hootie and the Blowfish record. Right. But what happened specifically was this is what a person who was in the record business in the sales side told me. He said you had two cohorts of people buying CDs. You had the young people who this was their format that they grew up with. They were buying CDs. But you had people like my sister, basically, who were like my older sisters, who were like boomers. Their Crosby, Stills and Nash like vinyl albums are like all worn out, and now they can get them on, CD, and they sound better and they hold up better and stuff like that. You had two cohorts, pretty large cohorts buying music, and if you hit anything like Blues Traveler or Spin Doctors or Hootie and the Blowfish that appealed to both segments, you sold a ton of records because they were already in the store replacing their Neil Young records or Dan Fogelberg records, right?
Yeah. I worked at Sam Goody in the 90s, and
well, maybe you can say something about. I mean, maybe was that your experience? I mean,
it is. So this is what I thought was one of the downfall, one of the boom, and then the downfall of the industry. Similarly, was that the people replacing their vinyls with CDs, but there wasn't a format change to follow other than MP3 and digital. You know what I mean? So there wasn't another physical. They tried with mini disc, but it just didn't hit. Whereas to go from vinyl to cassette to CD in such a short time period, it was almost like just continual growth. That's your capitalistic growth. And then the other section is the ubiquity of where you could buy a CD, because of like big box stores like Best Buy and Target and stuff like that at that time were using those things as loss leaders, just to kind of, bring people in the store so they could sell you a washer and dryer or something like that. And once those big, huge stores started kind of pulling out of that, that's what I think started to kind of implode all of the money and all of the sales that were coming through for them. Because like Sam Goody was bought out by Best Buy, so essentially they could raid their distribution. And then when that fell through, I want to say it was like Sun Capital ended up buying them, and then that was one of those firms that just kind of took on the debt and then crushed, an icon of music business, but.
Right.
But yeah, I have all kinds of red string theories on that time period because like I just find it so fascinating. Like I said, it's like a perfect storm of so many different things. It just kind of, I don't even want to say that it was in inflation. It was just a right place, right time kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, the music business, so going back to like, them trying to find the next big thing. I mean, they were in the 60s, there was sort of a period where the record business is like, look at all these hippies selling records, sign everybody with long hair,
Yeah.
And some were great and some weren't, and stuff like that. That's kind of been a theme that repeats through the music business. I was speaking to Martin Goldschmidt from Cooking Vinyl, the founder of Cooking Vinyl, who puts out all these records. And I had dinner with him before our Cracker show in January. And he's like, yeah, we kind of have gone from a business of just like, sign 10 acts and, hopefully two of them, one's really successful and one's, moderately successful kind of thing. Right. And he goes to a business where let's distribute 2,500 artists. And and not really give them any money up front, or very little money up front, right? It's just like it's risk averse because they will distribute a bunch of stuff, but they're not putting any money into it, right? It's like they pulled back on that side. Whereas in the 90s, they were like, well, let's just sign a whole bunch of bands, and we got this money sloshing around. Just give them money to make a good record. That's a crazy band. Give them money to make a good record with like a platinum selling like producer and engineer, even though it's like super weird,
Yeah.
It's like, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, well, you were one of the first people I remember ever reading or hearing kind of sounding the alarm bells about streaming and stuff like that. And I just
Hmm.
I'm about halfway through reading Liz Pelly's book, Mood Machine.
Yeah,
And
I read that book. It's a good book.
it's really disheartening to read. Like
I know.
it reaffirms a lot of my thoughts of what I thought was going on, and then is like, not only was this going on, but it was intentional, and that's the part that
Hmm.
I find depressing. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
because I've had this kind of thing that I've been saying for a long time, that people, and not everybody, but like the majority of people don't actually engage with music. And they don't want to. They just kind of want, as someone told me once, a scented candle to kind of lighten the room. And
Right.
and to find that, like, that's kind of been manipulated to, well, let's make a lot of stuff that's inoffensive and, doesn't kind
Hmm.
of force you to think, so that, you just keep playing it and playing it. It just feels so gross to me. Like it's,
Right. Right. Yeah, I know. But yeah, so it turns out that even people who are into music, they may start out as like, oh, I want to listen to that album. And then, the streaming service flips back into some sort of lean back mode where it's playing stuff that it thinks that you want to hear. As long as it's not offending you, you let it go.
yeah.
And they figured out that that's where they can jam in basically all of either at first they were having actual sort of like the jingle composers, the yoga mat composers, music composers and stuff like that, knocking off artists, and they were just buying those tracks outright and just padding their tracks with them. And then apparently now it's also being, AI is in there
Yeah.
too as well. So, and because a streaming service doesn't treat a song that you essentially wanted to play versus a song that's basically served up to you the same amount of royalties, the way there's a pool and it's divided up on a pro rata basis. It sort of rewards the non-offensive, like, background music the same it does the hard work music that I wanted to listen to.
Yeah.
It's created these really crappy financial incentives, and so you're getting more and more of kind of the slop and less of the, I don't know. The slop takes each of the play of the slop takes the same amount of money from the pool as the song that an artist actually sweated over, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it just kind of diminishes the entire pool of music. And artists write music out of the goodness of their heart a lot of times, because they feel um, compelled to write music and create music and stuff like that. But the more time you spend on your day job, the less money you're getting from making the music, the more time you spend on
Yeah.
your day job, and the less, like I always say, like if Camper had started in the streaming era, we would have made 3 albums and then wandered off and done something else with our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tough. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to not, like, kind of free fall into despair or whatnot,
Mhm.
for like a young musician trying to make it. But like, one of the things that this book kind of illuminated to me, and it's something I've been kind of meditating on with this, even with this podcast or my music. Like I make music, not successfully, but I make music, and I'm still out there playing and whatnot. But
Mhm.
is that I've spent because of what's been sold through social media and through streaming, I've spent a very long time trying to reach as many people as possible to try to, pick up whatever number of fans or followers or likes or
Mhm.
whatnot. Whereas I'm now kind of more engaged with trying to just find, like, 100 really cool people who actually want to have a conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
So I feel like I make this show. I originally made this show as something that I was like, well, it's got to kind of touch this, but it also can't alienate this. Whereas now I'm just like, I'm just going to talk to the people I want to talk to, and if people want to hear that, I hope they do. And I hope someone, but like my goal isn't world domination anymore. My goal is literally this conversation we're having here, and hopefully someone listens to it and enjoys it. You know what I mean? Like, but financially, that's not, that it's not going to change things. But emotionally and fulfillingly, it's very rewarding. I just saw yesterday, you're posting kind of song by song, kind of like you did with the 300 songs you've been doing on Substack, and I've been following and I've been really interested.
I'm still posting them on 300 songs.
Oh, you are?
Too,
okay.
Though. Yeah, it's just that WordPress blogs they're still there. Everybody's at Substack now. It's like the WordPress is like the MySpace, and everybody's on Instagram now or something.
Yeah.
So
I've been really.
I'll tell you though, there's something about Substack too. Though there's algorithm issues there. I already notice it, but like how the feed works and stuff like that. I'm like.
I often get confused in that Substack feed on like some of the things that it feeds me that isn't an article. It's literally just like someone saying like, how do people get followers on Substack? And I'm like, why did you say that? I know. You know what I mean? It's so weird. Like it's the way LinkedIn transitioned into some of this weird like social media space. That's what's happening with Substack. So I wish I'd been on there earlier. Yeah.
Because it's starting to feel like, but it's got really good tools for writing and there's a lot of great things about it. It also has a subscription thing that you can do, which is a little weird, but still, that's what it's got its thing. It also gets me to sort of a kind of a reader audience. So, yes. Which I have to with this album because it's an album and this written stuff. So, yeah.
The one of the things I was going to say about Substack is that I follow Emily White's on there, and I just saw that yesterday was the 13th anniversary of that article that she wrote about stealing. That she only bought 15 CDs. The one that you responded to, with the tricorderist. Yeah. Which first of all is crazy that it was 13 years ago, but but it's wild to think that like 13 years ago, the main, issue was illegal downloading. And like now it's like legal steal. No, I won't say stealing, but legally not giving creators their fair share of music. You know what I mean?
It's all those services are licensed, but the licensing arrangements were created in a market failure where, people could just also steal music pretty easily. And so those licensing deals do not reflect a fair market value. Unfortunately, we're kind of locked into them now. And now we've trained a generation of people to expect to pay very little for music. And I'm not sure that we can undo it. I do like the Bandcamp models though out there. I mean, but even Bandcamp is struggling. But the idea that you sort of sell your music, it's a streaming app on my phone, but I bought all the songs, so I paid for all the streams in advance, right? So I'm not financing the streaming platforms because that's the other thing. Is not only are the rates bad, it's like we loan the content to the streaming services, and then they pay us back per stream over a number of, 10 years or whatever. So effectively, we're the investors in those platforms, but we don't get any of the upside, It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Bandcamp. So like the Father, Sons, and Brothers is kind of made up of the 3 EPs and a little more. Those were Bandcamp exclusive, or were you selling them through your site?
They were physical. I sold them through my website as well as on Bandcamp. They were physical CDs, and they were also downloads, high fidelity downloads.
What was the process of that like? Kind of bypassing streaming in this era to kind of move music, like.
Well, the cool thing about that was getting just just say, hey, you can buy the CD or not. It's $25. I'll ship it to you from my website.
Yeah.
I'm literally, about $2 in manufacturing each and a small credit card charge and, shipping costs, which are pretty cheap too. Each one of those allowed me to pay everybody who, by doing it that way, where they're sold the CDs, physical products first. They allowed me to pay everybody who worked on my record, because a lot of times what happens now is people are making records, they're just getting their friends to play on it, and nobody's getting paid. So, I don't know if I paid people truly what they were worth, but I tried to pay everybody at least a single union session, right?
Okay, yeah.
3-hour session, like what Nashville, whatever the Nashville rate was, right? It's like, okay, so I would pay everybody at least that. Some people got a little more because they worked on it for so long and stuff like that. But that was one of the things about selling the CD and selling Bandcamp, is that I could pay everybody to work on it, and
yeah.
It also got compensated for my time, whereas it's going to take like a decade probably for me to really recoup the same amount of money from the Father, Sons, and Brothers streaming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So unless we have a hit or something like that, but the only way we're going to have a hit is if somebody puts it in a movie or a television show. It's
right.
not even really radio anymore,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, other than I co-host the other show that you shared the episode that we did where I brought the Take the Skinheads Bowling, and I brought the I wrote the song Take the Skinheads Bowling, which still I think is the most brilliant song title ever and premise. But I could my co-host on that, Bruce, is big in the NPR world, and I got to go to non-com this year, and to talk to all of these non-commercial radio people and truly understand what the threat is that they're facing right now in the current administration, of we are possibly going to lose the only kind of the last vestige of a radio station that can play a new David Lowery song, or a Cracker, or an old Cracker song, or an old Camper Van song, and it's terrifying to me.
Yeah, I haven't totally followed that, but I was actually there's 2 radio stations that are on the air that are community stations that Cracker played benefits for and basically bought them their transmitters over the years. So I should pay more attention to that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that scared me was that I didn't realize this, but the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which, is funded by the government, what is at threat is they cover the music licenses for all of the non-commercial radio stations in the U.S., which I didn't know. So what it would require is every single non-commercial station to negotiate their own licensing rates, which, a station like WXPN here in Philadelphia will probably be able to do based on membership. But a small station in Oklahoma, maybe not, some of these college stations, maybe not.
Right.
And that was the thing that shocked me, because I'm a member of the station, and, I talk to a lot of members, and I know that, the membership is strong in this area, but I also know that we're kind of lucky to be in a major market like this, so.
Right. That's right.
I know that Cracker is coming to town here in August for an outdoor show at Concerts Under the Stars that I'm looking forward to. But are you doing any solo touring at all for Father, Sons, and Brothers?
I am. I have. I'm kind of alternating between either playing with Cracker Camper one week and then doing some solo shows the next week. But the thing about Father, Sons, and Brothers is it's more than a record. So this is sort of a longer project. So I'll probably be working this record for 2 years. I'm at Elkton Music Hall with Jim Lauderdale the day after that isn't that, what's that, Eagle? What's the,
Yeah, I think it's Eagleville.
What's that? Eagleville or something,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So the day after that, I'm at Elkton Music Hall. It's not real close. It's like 40 miles from Philly, I guess. It's in Maryland.
Yeah.
But there, I'll be there. But I will probably be in Philly and New York later in the fall.
Okay.
So you can look for me then, but it's going to kind of take me a while to get there. So,
yeah. What is the, like, for those who don't know, like Father, Sons, and Brothers kind of traces your life through song. It's kind of an autobiography in song. What is the kind of reaction been to it? Like, not just from, fans, but like friends and family?
Well, I had a funny story. There's a song called "How Does Your Sister Roller Skate?" about my older sister is disabled. She was, born with cerebral palsy. She's had a relatively normal life. She has a daughter, and she's married, and she drove a car and had a job and all that stuff. She's a little struggled as she's got older, but I thought, like, this is one thing, like, I'll do really cool for my sisters. I'll tell her story through a song. And so we got done with the mix and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll always talk to her through the iPad. The iPad is wonderful. It's iMessaging. It's not very technically savvy, but I can drop songs in there, videos, all kinds of stuff. So we were just done mixing. So I dropped the song, the mix of the song into iMessage for her and wrote, "Hey, I wrote a song about you," thinking that she'd be like, "Oh my God, that's so sweet. That's amazing," and stuff like that. And I could tell she received it. I could tell she read it. And it just, like, 45 minutes went by, and I was like, oh. And then she just writes back, "Pretty good." Like,
that's great.
It's like hilarious. I'm like, what the? Okay, yeah. Not everybody writes a song about you every day.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. No, generally my family is super into it. There's a lot of, I think also too, for my nieces and nephews, there's a few things about the family history that they just had no idea about. Like it's a pretty dark event in my dad's family history is the murder-suicide of his brother back in Arkansas when he was relatively, well, he would have been like probably 16 or 17. Like they had no idea about that story and how that shaped like everything that happened with his family after that. The Little League basically left Arkansas, went, started basically being, like itinerant farm workers in California and stuff like that after that. And, Grapes of Wrath stuff,
Yeah.
So, that was like kind of cool. I just, today's song that I posted the blog for is Battle of Leros, which is about my grandfather's service in the Royal Navy in World War II. Although I got the name of the battle wrong. Battle of Leros is actually later in the war.
Oh, no.
But anyway, it still tells his story and, sort of my tribute to like the greatest generation in my family,
Yeah.
So, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one of the ones that stood out to me, and I think you wrote about it just the other day, was everybody get a fucking day job, because it's one of those ones that really, as someone who dual wields this podcast and then also now 2 day jobs or whatnot, but like it is. I feel like it perfectly sums up the plight of like musicians, and not just your musicians who maybe someone's never heard of, but like I don't know how many people recognize that a lot of the people that they see or hear on the radio or on TV still work a day job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I think like there's just this kind of like mythic nature in your head where it's like, oh, that person's on stage, so that must just be what they do, But
Right.
I thought it was a great exploration of that, and kind of, the way you wrote about it, kind of also playing in not just the end of Camper Van, but also playing into the COVID era and
Yeah.
whatnot, was fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like I said, that's one of the songs that has the Spanish, almost like a Sevillana sort of strumming or a flamenco style strumming thing to it. And the strings. That's what they're doing with the strings on that song. Yeah, that was precisely sort of right after Camper Van Beethoven broke up and we were back to our old lives, but also was about COVID because, I always thought I was kind of hedging my bets when I married my wife because she's a concert promoter. So she's on the other side of the contract. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sort of sitting on both sides of the table here and stuff like that. But I never foresaw, like that both of our jobs would go away at the same time. It was a little crazy. Fortunately, I started working at University of Georgia and had that as a full-time job. So we went online for a while and then we went hybrid for like a year. But yeah, it was that's kind of crazy. You really start thinking about stuff. You realize like how insignificant you are in this grand scheme of things. You go from being the center of attention on stage to just being pretty much just totally insignificant.
Yeah.
Hey, I should say I have a hard out
Okay.
at 2 because I have a board meeting at 2. So
all right, yeah. So let me wrap this up then, real quick. With my questionnaire that I ask all my guests. We'll kind of speed through this. It starts. It's called the Jauntlet. It starts with the one-hit wonders. You're just picking a favorite in this one. It starts with Billy Joel or Elton John. Who do you prefer?
Elton John.
Excellent. Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Joan Jett.
Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha Franklin.
Okay, yeah. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Pearl Jam.
I kind of thought so. Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
All right. Beatles.
I feel like I dated Janis Joplin when I was younger, and I don't need to go.
It's so funny because quite the opposite. I feel like,
but that's all. It's just a aversion to Janis. It's just sort of like, oh no.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
That's how I feel about Stevie Nicks. That's so weird because like I'm like so many exes were Stevie Nicks clones.
Yeah.
Beatles or the Stones?
Oh. It used to be the Beatles, then it was the Stones, but lately I've been like going back to the Beatles. I don't know what's going on, but I think I'm going to say Beatles now.
Okay, I like it. Last one of the one-hit wonders: Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Kevin Hansen told me that he was the prosecution's expert witness in the Stairway copyright lawsuit, and that he had to play Stairway to Heaven in front of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. And I was like, that's got to be the worst thing in the world to have to do.
That is funny. That's great. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. The next section is the top 10 countdown. You're just telling me your favorite. We use Jawn to be whatever you want it to be. The first one is, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were a kid?
Shortwave radio and then into amateur radio. I've been an amateur radio operator since 1972.
Oh,
I was a kid when I got my license, and I built radios and antennas and stuff like that.
It's amazing. You still do now? Uh-huh. Oh, that's killer. That is killer. Yeah. Number 2, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
I will have to say, as a non-music hobby, it's still amateur radio. There's been like all this digital stuff that's super neat. Like I spend a lot of times, I don't even know how to explain it on this podcast, but basically dealing with weird software and sort of homemade little tiny computers that run amateur radio things and programs and stuff like that, create these broad digital and become nodes in this sort of our own sort of prepper post-apocalyptic sort of internet that we have over the shortwave radio frequencies.
Super interesting. I dig that.
Yeah, but I got back into that kind of in COVID because a friend of mine kind of went all prepper. He was trying to get into amateur radio. It's like, I got an amateur radio license. What do you want to know? And then I discovered it's like, oh wait, he's getting into all this new digital stuff like I need to learn about that. And so I got totally back into it. So, a lot of people lost their minds with COVID.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was a good time for amateur radio.
I was just going to say this podcast started during that. So yeah, I feel it definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Number 3, what was your first concert, first live show?
That I saw?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my sisters, I was really pretty young, but we went to the University of Redlands, had a Greek theater outside, and they had Blues Image, the Pointer Sisters, and somebody else. I can't remember who the third act was that played. So Blues Image, Ride Captain Ride, and then
Cool.
that was like early in the Pointer Sisters' career. Like why those two bands would be on tour together.
I was just going to say
they were out there touring, and I think those were like early radio sponsored shows, like how Top 40 Radio. That was the end of that era where Top 40 Radio would put on a show.
Yeah,
and it'd just be kind of random collection of who was on the radio. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. Number 4, what was your last concert, last live show you saw?
Last live show was actually the Black Crowes. They were really good.
That's great.
Yeah, that was the last one.
Love those dudes. Number 5, favorite concert, best live show you ever saw?
Well, this is a little weird, but I think one of the sort of a life-changing, like almost transcendental moment was I saw this guy, Cheb Khaled. I think he just goes by Khaled now, but he's the Algerian singer who's been doing Rai music for a really long time. He's one of the pioneers of Rai music. But I spent some time in North Africa in 1990 and got into Rai music. And then we were just playing a rock festival in Sweden one time. And I was looking to see who was on the other stages. And I was like, oh my God, Cheb Khaled's playing. So I went over there. And I mean, it was just like a band, just like the band was so insane, so amazing. His voice is so good, so powerful. I don't speak Arabic, have no idea what he's talking about, but it was transcendental, like moment, like very trancy because the songs are really long and stuff like that. And then the funniest thing is after the show, I'm just backstage and he's just talking to everybody backstage. He's like one of the biggest stars in North Africa and stuff like that. And I was just like in English, was like, you're one of the best singers out there. And he spoke enough English. I was like, you're one of the best singers I've ever seen.
That's
and
awesome.
He's like, oh, he spoke enough English to say, oh, where do you go? And then he did this weird thing where he just like, oh, let's go watch some other shows. And I was like his friend and we went and watched all these other bands perform. Like we were best friends or something like that. It was really interesting and really great. But anyway, that's a very sort of obscure one, but
that's beautiful. That's a beautiful moment.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, who have you never seen live who you wish you could have?
Well, I've never seen the Rolling Stones. I mean, it's weird, but I've never seen the Rolling Stones, right?
Yeah.
I think I would, but I'm not sure what like necessarily seeing them today, but maybe they're, but I wish I had gone to see them back in the 70s or the 80s. I mean, that's just, I know so much of their catalog.
Yeah. Oh God, I love them so much.
I won't say the Beatles because they'd really broken up before I could go see them. But yeah, I mean, I would have loved to see them.
I just saw Ringo on Sunday, and still a consummate performer. Dude still entertains. Number 7, name an unappreciated, Jawn. Something you wish more people paid attention to.
It can be anything.
Anything you want. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a Netflix series called Search Party. I think it's one of the best pieces of television. It's really weird, dark comedy. It's kind of gets compared to Arrested Development, but it's more complex than that. A lot of people hated it. But like, for instance, if you like that kind of like super dense, really dense, like comedy dialogue, like Arrested Development, it's kind of like that. I don't know. It was interesting. It had a really great arc because it's actually a zombie. It's an apocalyptic zombie series,
but
it takes 4 seasons to turn into that.
That's awesome. That is so cool. I got to check it out. In the interest of time, I'll prune some of these dumb ones, and I'll just go for number 10. What's your favorite Jawn of all time? What's the thing that excites you the most in life?
I've always been a big dog lover. So
Yeah?
I wake up in the morning, take my dog for a walk. In the evening, they're the best. They make your lives better.
Definitely agree with that. I got two myself, including a three-legged dog who
I had a three-legged dog as well at one point.
Yeah, the best. Absolutely the best.
Yeah.
So the album Father, Sons, and Brothers came out at the end of May. It is available on physical, right? And you got vinyl, you got CDs, and they can find you. It's davidlowerymusic.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And they can find you on Substack at davidclowery.substack.com. And on the socials, you're David C. Lowery as well, correct?
At Twitter and also on Facebook, I think, too. So, yes.
Man, I cannot thank you enough for doing this and sitting with me today. And the album's absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see you guys when you come to town in August.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.
My many thanks again to David for joining me on the show today, and again, my sincere apologies for running long. Father, Sons, and Brothers is available now on all streaming services and is available on vinyl and CD on his website at davidlowerymusic.com. You can read the stories behind the tracks on Father, Sons, and Brothers and more on David's Substack at davidclowery.substack.com, and you can follow David on the socials at David C. Lowery. You can see David live locally here with his band Cracker on Tuesday, August 5th in Exton, PA at the Eagle View Town Center as part of the Eagle View Summer Concert Series. That show is free. And you can catch David solo with Jim Lauderdale the following night on August 6th, performing songs from Father, Sons, and Brothers at the Elkton Music Hall in Elkton, Maryland. Links to all of those are, of course, as always, in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast wherever you get your podcast from. And guys, it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout merit badge for citizenship of the world just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for the link tree with links to articles, merchandise, all of the previous episodes of this podcast, guest appearances on other podcasts, and more. And while you are there, please be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight into your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. We did it yet again. Thank you so much for your patience. We should be back in 2 weeks, so keep an eye out for that one. Blue skies until next time, everybody.
That's my Jawn.
Displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You taste things that don't need to be measured. Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production. Written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by me, under the moniker Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Maggie Poulos, Dan Drago, Natalie Runkle, and the beautifully vibrant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com or hit us up on the socials at yothat'smyjawn. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Tilt your head back and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.